Welcome, everyone. I'm really excited to have you here. As you probably know, my name is Cindy, and I am the president and CEO of The Good Partnership, and we specialize in helping very, very small nonprofits with their fundraising. And it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Amy Milne, who is the president and I want to say chief creative officer for Beyond Inc., which is so fantastic, specializing in fundraising events. And Amy and I met for the first time, almost 2 years ago, I want to say. And we hit it off immediately because we both shared this sense that events need to be fun. They need to reinforce your mission, and you need to understand what you want to get out of them for them to be worthwhile and meaningful for your organization. And so we've been chatting ever since. And as soon as I started doing these monthly master classes, I thought Amy needs to be on, because events are something that every nonprofit, especially small ones, struggle with. And maybe you have a board member who says, so-and-so organization had a gala that raised $1 million in a night. We need to do one. Or, how to understand what you should be doing and all that. So, Amy, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit more? I don't have, that was just my personal intro of you, but
Perfect.
Okay. What Amy's being very modest about is she's a rock star and guru in this area, trained with the best, knows her stuff, which you will see very shortly. So I'm going to start with a question, and you guys feel free to, in the chat, ask your own questions or ask us to elaborate. But Amy, how do we know when to do an event and when not to do an event?
Well, you know not to do an event when your board member tells you you should do an event, with absolutely no reason, no background, no being. I think at the end of the day, I think at the beginning of the day, everybody needs to look at what is it they're going to do and what is their overall goal. And if an event fits in there, then what is it you want it to achieve? But also, before you do any of that, it's why. Why are you doing it? Just because the guy down the street, not good enough. Just because Princess Margaret did it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And so I think it's managing expectations of yourself and everyone else. And, you've always got the flip side, right? Because there's people, when you look at your organization and an event would work, and people are like, they cost money, they don't work. So you've got that negative side of things. And then you have the other side where it's, we've got to do so many of them and they're so easy and they're turnkey and we just need to fill our calendar because that's what everybody else is doing. And I think that clutter is, it's that clutter that has ultimately gotten in the way. And in my opinion, has really skewed why people feel the way they do about events, whether it be a positive or a negative. And events have a place. And I know this is what you and I, Cindy, had, could have talked for days about still. And I'm sure many people on the phone, is that events absolutely have a place in your organization. What they are, or how they're done, or when they happen, whether they're online, offline, in person, 3 people, 10 people, 100 people, all of that those are all things that need to be considered. And it's not just because a board member says so.
So when you're looking at your event strategy, what kind of factors go into those decisions? Like your volunteers, your board, your community. What should people, if there are 3 things that they should start by looking at to say, okay, what kind of an event is going to work for us? What would you want them to consider?
So you'd need to have some money, because while people think they can do everything for free, it's just not the case. And it's absolutely not the way that you should lead, by thinking that everything you're going to get is going to be free. I think there needs to be a budget. I always work with organizations, big and small, where the answer is sponsorship. We're going to get cash sponsorship. Well, cash sponsorship may or may not come. Gift in kind may or may not come. So the number one thing for me always is, do you have money to do the event if nothing was free. Because realistically, as soon as you start inviting people, you have to throw an event. And I think you have to manage those expectations amongst yourself and your boards and your volunteers or whoever they may be, that we might have to pay for this ourselves. The goal is to get things donated and what have you. So I would say money.
Yeah.
I would say I would say 80% buy-in, because I think it's majority rules for the support you're going to get, whether you're an executive director on your own, and you know you've got a good idea and you're ready to go, and your board is hesitant, but if you've got 80% support, and if you're a staff member and you've got an idea, I don't ever think 100% is realistic, and you could say 78.5, because I think, again, it does go back to people's feelings about events, and people's feelings are not what's going to drive revenue or event participation, and feelings get in the way, I think, a lot at the nonprofit in the sector overall. That's another soapbox. So I like feelings, and I like to think that I'm a good feeling person, but feelings can't drive our business. And 3, you definitely have to have thought about, what is that event? And does that event make sense for you? So great, someone's like, we should throw a gala, or we've always wanted to. Okay, does that make sense? Does that fit your constituency? If you're a nonprofit organization who serves children and families, and children are your client, just as an example, does hosting, if you can only throw one event, do you throw an event just for adults in the evening? It doesn't really fit. So I think it's a matter of what are you doing? So it's the money, it's the support, and the thing. Like, what is that event?
Yeah.
Does it serve your constituency?
I love that, because I see so many people just think, well, this is a good event idea, but part of the challenge is you need to get people out to your events. And I'd love for you to take a minute to talk about that, and in particular, the tension between staff and volunteers, and like who's responsible for what, and what do you need like to actually get people out to things.
Well, I think that could also be a day on topic for all of us in terms of that tension and such. But when it comes to the actual events, if you've got that buy-in, and use those volunteers or those board members as your advocates, when you're ready for them, I think if you're building that event, and you're building the plan and the budget and the strategy and the why and the what, get that as much built as you can, so that when you go and sit with people, it's a lot more baked than just starting from scratch, because you're the professional, you know what you want. And so have that, seek out who you need to help you get to that plan point, and then present. So it's always nice, and we know working with boards and volunteers, it's always nice to have other people's input. And while we think we're all genius, or maybe that's just me, while we think we're all genius, other people's ideas can influence and add value and all of those types of things. But I really think you need to have a fully baked plan ahead of getting everyone, before you present to everyone.
Yeah.
That's when things just seem uncertain and people feel they can come in and just take it over.
Yeah. And I think that if you took your earlier advice about making sure that the event strategy and plan actually fits your organization and reflects back your community and the people you have access to and the people you're likely to get to come out to things, when you go and present it to your board or individual supporters, it should be pretty straightforward, right? It should be like, how can you help us on this journey, instead of, hey, let's throw a bunch of ideas on a chalkboard and what resonates. Like, you have very strong legs to stand on when you're having those conversations, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I'm just, so I want to go.
Can I add something in there? Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
Go.
I was just going to say, one of the things I spoke about, and maybe you'll ask the question. So you ask the question and then
you go first.
You're good.
I was going to ask.
So I was just, go ahead. There's a delay on my side. You go, you're running the show, not me. Go ahead.
No. You, I'm waiting for you.
Okay, my hands are up, I'm talking. So what I was going to say, just to give a further example, because a lot of things are people like, okay, but how does something, like, give me an example of what I meant in terms of, does it mean something? Like, does it match our constituent group and what have you? So started doing work with an organization called POGO, Pediatric Oncology Group of Ontario. So they're not wonderfully large. They're not super small either. They're in there, and they have a unique challenge similar to many of the people on the phone, is that they support other organizations. So, their constituents belong and are serviced by other nonprofit organizations or hospitals or what have you. So for years and years and years, wonderful cause, great. They're a child, they have pediatrics in their name. They have only ever thrown a gala. It doesn't make sense because they can never showcase the work they're doing, the clients they serve, or support the families. Now, hey, I'm a mom and I love a good night out, but that makes sense for me. But for an organization like that who serves families and children, that's in their mission, that's in their title, but they've spent all this money and time at an event, which absolutely raised some money, but didn't serve their constituency. So it was always very confusing. And so I've been very lucky to work with them, and we've created 2 event concepts for them. So while the gala was still important, we turned it into a cocktail party at a lower price point, so that people that graduate from their programs can then become involved. And it's very important for people, to do that and to want to, get through. I've done the kid event, and now what am I doing to support the event as I grow? And then we started a DIY event for families and for everybody really, but now we serve the whole community in which the organization serves. And so with that, great, okay, what have you done? So we're still doing a cocktail party, but what we decided to do, and even drill down more, is we decided to own the pajama. So when kids are in cancer care, they wear their pajamas a lot. So we decided we wanted to own the pajama, and the pajama we wanted synonymous with POGO and kids cancer. So we wanted to take that pajama and make sure it had legs everywhere. So our evening cocktail party is fireside and flannel, and it's so simple. And this is where I would really challenge you guys as we look at everyone's, event or organizations in which you serve. Sorry, I needed to move around. It's not pajamas. There's no pajama party in Toronto right now. And we didn't find any really that were outside of some like interesting looking ones in the US. But so now it's fireside and flannel, and every year we'll change the type of pajama we would encourage you to wear. And then on the DIY side, which I'm happy to talk about more what that is, where I think it's great for a lot of smaller orgs, is pajamas and pancakes. So it's literally throw a pajama and pancake party at your place of business, at your school. It is such a simple concept. It doesn't cost people a lot of money. And we can really take that iconic thing that people know and turn it into something bigger to associate it with the cause. Yeah. So it's a really, and I'm happy to share the links when they all go live and such as well, and talk further about it, but it's been a really great process because we went down to like the why, who they serve, who's their client, who comes. At the same time, who do we want in the pipeline? Because they didn't have any considered.
Amazing. So you cut out there for 1 second at the end, but I think we all got that. That's okay. I don't know if it's my connection or someone.
It might be me.
But I just want to ask everyone on the line, like, I love examples like that. Do you want to hear a couple more from Amy of like really creative and simple things that really tie the mission back to the event, or do you get it and should we move on to the next? Yeah, real examples. People love that. I think it's so hard sometimes for us to imagine because all we see are the big things. So can we take a couple more minutes and can you give us 1 or 2 more examples of creative, simple things that work regardless of your budget that really showcase what an organization is about?
Right. Yeah, I was just looking through the chat too, because I wanted to see, I wanted to see where people were at. And so I absolutely share some real life, but even, looking at the rebuilding organization, rebuilding together, what have you. I don't actually know what you do. I'm going to assume, I'm sorry if I'm assuming wrong, that you actually physically build things for people, and whether you rebuild communities or what have you. And so I would start to look at, I'm not giving you real life examples right now. I'm creating events for people, but he said she needed ideas.
Valuable.
So I look at rebuilding and I'm like, okay, what do you ultimately need to build? Like, what is it the barest of, oh, perfect. Habilitate homes and community centers. Thank you. And now, so, I look at that and I go, okay, what at the bare bones outside of like people, but what's that like thing? So I think of like a hammer and a nail at the simplest. So how do you then, even better, gives ideas. So, a hammer and a nail. Yeah. Okay. What can you do with a hammer? What does a nail mean? What does a hammer mean? And how, when they work together, does that ultimately rebuild a community? And then people are like, okay, how do you get that to an event? Okay, so then it's going to take a little longer than this call, and I'm more than happy to do a brainstorm. But it's like, for me, that's where I start. Like, for me, the creative juices start in like literally stripping everything back and not being literal, but somewhat in the sense of, okay, because there is deep meaning behind a hammer and a nail and where it came from and those two together and what do they mean. And then the more people that pick up the hammers and they get more nails. So an event is not just what happens on an event day. An event is what happens as you build, I like to call events products, not because it's unfriendly or for-profit-ish, it makes sense. And so all the things, you have to build a relationship with the event and the people and what it is, so that people actually want to come and they start to, because if that's the door they're coming into your organization, then you've got to tell them a story and you've got to make them want to buy it. Yeah. And because the difference is when you're hosting an event, you're selling your mission and your event. Hearts and hammers, love it. So I'm getting ideas here. People are like thinking about stuff. So, people might not know about your org, but see your heart and your hammer and want to hit the nail in the middle of the heart so that the whole world explodes and great things happen. So, it's a product. And so you have to think about how you're going to sell it. So it's mission and the event and how do they intertwine. And I think what's happened over time is that organizations have just thrown an event, which again, a walk is a walk. A cocktail party is a place where we're not going to all of a sudden create different things until we go to the moon and all those kinds of things. But how do we take that, experience and make it meaningful and have it intertwined? And I don't think we as a sector have done a really good job taking what we sell, what we help, what we do, and actually make it a meaningful part of our event.
Yeah. And I think that that's so relevant to another big challenge that people have, which is how do you take event attendees and actually raise more money from them or build stronger relationships year round with them so that they become your loyal supporters? And we'll come back to more real world examples or brainstorming later if we have time at the end. But I think that this is so critical, especially to small organizations where it's like, okay, your event may or may not make lots of money, but what else can it do for you and how else can you use it to build relationships and raise money in the long term?
Totally. And you blanked out a little bit too. I think it might be on my end, but I think the idea is like, once you have someone at your party or at your event, what do you do with them? How do you keep them involved? So this is another, someone somewhere, we all have them in our office. We have no idea who their name is or where their office is, but they told someone you can't talk to event people or peer-to-peer donors or gala people don't want to be talked to after you say thank you. I've never found that someone, and that someone should be fired because they were saying all the wrong things. So when your constituent comes to you, when your participant has bought a gala ticket and they've brought their guests and they've had a great time, they've bought silent action items, they might have bought their raffle ticket, their friend might have done that, or they might have been at your walk or your run or what have you. You need to talk to them every month till the next time. I personally, and I always like, and I tend to think of what I like and I don't like, and I've got long lists of both. And so I sort of govern that when I'm looking at what that experience piece is. So I've gone to let's use a cocktail party as an example, because I know because we can look at all of them, but with a gala, because it's the one where people don't take care of their guests, in my opinion, the best. So I've gone to your gala or your cocktail party, we've sent the thank you, and then we don't talk to you again until we ask you to buy a ticket again. And it's just kind of like, really? Thanks for the warm and fuzzies. It's like, you don't know why I came to your organization. You don't know if I was just invited. You don't know if I really like the cocktails you serve. You don't know if, like, for Flannel and Fireside, I've been dying to wear my pajamas. You have no idea why I'm there. And it's up to you to figure that out. And if you engage with me, as we say, like we do it so well as nonprofit professionals with every other constituent group, but somehow we let this like little group over here that could be big, that is social. They have not only just like written a check and put it in the mail, they have physically come out and brought people with them.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people forget that a gala or a cocktail party is also a peer-to-peer event. It usually takes one person who then asks people who ask people who come. And so, those people you want to get to know as well. And that someone somewhere who said you can't talk to their guests is a liar. And like I said, should be fired. So you really need to build a post-event strategy that is well past the thank you note. Yeah. Because people, what did you do with that money? Did you raise any? Did you do good work with it? Tell those gala people that. And my advice would be, in the first year, in the first cycle, don't all of a sudden shift them into, well, they came and so now, okay, we said thank you. So now we're actually going to send them solicitations on, our monthly giving program. It's like, I came through the gala doors. Talk to me there. Speak to me there. I was attracted to your organization based on that brand. So don't move me. It's kind of like if I came to your house, Cindy, for dinner and I knocked on the door and you welcomed me in. I was like, great, I'm at Cindy's house for dinner. And you're like, actually, you're supposed to go through the back door and knock on the door to the left. See ya. It's kind of like that. It's like, well, I never got to have dinner at Cindy's house. So, think about those things when you're looking at what your strategy should be, but it is a big fail on many orgs' fault. None of you, as you're probably all going like, oh my God, you're not alone. We spent a lot of time at my retreat that we do with nonprofit professionals building our post-event strategies for all. And a lot of people are like, really? You do one for cocktail parties and galas? Yeah, dinner parties, anything. When you have those, I'm sure a lot of people in smaller orgs have like 6 people for dinner and may do a major gift ask or what have you. That's an event and that's where they came. So talk to them about that. Remind them where they were. People don't think. And so remind them and give them that information. But they want to hear from you. And when they don't, they'll delete it. The Gap emails me 6 times and I pay it a day and I pay attention when the jeans are on sale. So they'll eventually pay attention.
Exactly. So we hear this a lot. And I know my colleague Sarah's on the call too, because we're doing this with our clients right now, which is, everyone's afraid. So first of all, there's this huge fear that like your donors will get fatigued from hearing from you, or that you'll over communicate with them. But consistently when we're talking to actual donors and doing donor surveys and stuff, they all say they want to hear from organizations more. And I think the point that you're making, Amy, is so important, is that it's a long journey, that in the first little while, talk to them about the things that they already know about, right? You're not trying to educate them on your whole organization and all the ins and outs. And you should use stories, but that's a whole other conversation. But just start with them where they are. It's a journey that takes time, and slowly start to evolve that relationship. So talk to them in the language they're used to seeing. If you had a speaker, like a client speaker or former client speaker at the event, recycle that story in future communications so that you're not like surprising them as like a different organization. Hey, that was us, but this is us too. It's like, here's slowly how you discover and deepen that connection. I think that's so relevant. So,
well, and especially because you want people to come back too, right? Yeah. Like you want people to come back to you need and want to fill your room. You need and want to fill your event. And so maybe I will just always be an event donor.
Yeah.
And I think that's great.
Yeah. And if that's the case, I'd love to see you bring out more friends, I guess,
Right?
Right? Like, I think that's a huge opportunity. Tanya had a question that I think is, I'm going to pivot it to a similar but different question. We'll come back to yours, Tanya, but how do you actually, so beyond ticket sales, what are some of the best or more creative ways to actually get people giving when you have them in front of you?
So one of the things that you definitely have to do at any of your parties or your walks or runs or what have you is make sure so in terms of like building the momentum in the event and the commitment, like the people being engaged and then asking, because I know it's like, how do we make more money? It's also some of it's stuck in the details. So don't give me 45 minutes to an hour worth of speeches. Not interested. And if we're bored, then our guests are certainly bored. So, I always like to use this in terms of sometimes us as nonprofits can be really bad dinner guests because all we do is talk about ourselves. And we forget there's someone sitting across the table from us. So I always think about it, well, the event is the number one, once you have people there and in the beginning, say at your opening ceremonies, at your walk or run, or at that moment in your cocktail party or evening, those 7 to 10 minutes, 7 to 10 minutes is really all that you should be speaking, and make it impactful and important and to the point. And then while you've got them at your party, you can talk to them. Who are the people in the room? Who are the people, but not from a pulpit, but from a guest approach. I like analogies a lot. So I think about it at a wedding. And so use the wedding analogy, and you're there for Amy and Eric's wedding. Amy and Eric don't have to get up and stand and talk to you for 4 hours to let you know you're at Amy and Eric's wedding. So think about how you use people in the room. Think about what it is you want to talk. What is your need at that time? We all need money. People there know we need it. So you can directly ask. You can put donor cards on your table. You can, silent auctions they still make money, but make sure your silent auction makes sense. If, we're doing a flannel and fireside, just as an example. So we're doing fireside and flannel. So our silent auction will be geared to food and experiences and evening. So you take that theme of like what fireside and flannel, and then fill your silent auction table with that stuff, because that helps add to the feel of your event and to the experience. Yeah. So you do that. You can do raffles as long as you get your licenses and stuff. But I think you can fund a mission. A lot of organizations they've got a project, or they've got the thing they're working on right now, or they're filling a campaign or what have you. Genuinely ask, ask for money.
Yeah, that's
and I mean, you don't have to get so creative. And I would say is pick 1 or 2, because you don't want to get so creative that now you're doing 30 things and then nothing is being paid attention to. So if you're smaller and you're going to do a silent auction, make it a darn fine silent auction, and look into some great tools that you can do your online auction. So guests who can't make it to the party can still bid on things as well. So there's little nuances, but I would just suggest, and with any event, big or small, pick the things that matter, pick the things you really want, like 3 or 4 things to do, and do them really, really well.
Yeah. I just want to come back to 2 things that you said, actually. So one is around, talking to people, because everyone is so uncomfortable with small talk often, but this is a really, really important task. And it's also a really good one that your board can do. So I know organizations are always struggling with, how do we get our board involved in fundraising? Board members will say, am I cutting out, or is that I'm hearing weird things? You can hear me okay?
I can hear you.
I will do anything but fundraise. All those kinds of things. Simply give them a list of 5 people they need to meet and talk to at an event. They're not asking for money. They're just getting to know them. How was the food? Get feedback. People love giving feedback. How was the food, or the speaker, or what have you? Or, tell me about your family. Tell me about your work. It doesn't matter. You just want to engage with people on a one-to-one level. And that's such a great role for your board. And be deliberate. Like literally give them a list of people that's their mission for that night to talk to them and introduce them, thank them for being there, etc. It's better if the board members know those people or sort of know those people, but even if they don't really know those, make sure they're introducing themselves. The second thing that I want to dive into a little bit more, because I've used it work really, really well. And it kind of touches on Tanya's question about promoting your mission within your event. I'm not communications, but within your event, I'm going to say, which is the fund a mission. So I did this when I was at a women's shelter and we were building a new shelter. And we basically, instead of a live auction, it might have been in addition to a live auction, we actually had an auctioneer ask people to raise their hands. Will you fund a new bed for $200? Will you fund a chair for the dining area for like $50 or whatever? And people were just like raising their hands like gangbusters. Everyone is coming to these events expecting to spend money, right? They know it's a fundraiser. And this is a way that they can give money towards something that they feel is impactful and mission-based, and they don't feel obligated to take home another like whatever auction item. Honestly, it was like a game changer for that organization. Do you have any other examples of when that's worked really well?
Yeah, well, and just to expand on to how that adds, yes, it absolutely, Pogo has done it. You know, they did it at their old gala. We did it multiple times at Sick Kids, where, you know, you have something tangible. What I love about some of these organizations that have tangibility is that you can also, you know, again, if we're looking at, I'm stuck on the hammer right now. It's clearly we need to have a brainstorm because I've got lots of ideas here, but those mission items that you may need, or how you bring them to life. So even if you don't have chairs to sell or desks to sell, you know, how about, because you're going to build a house, so then you have some plywood and you have some hammers and you have building supplies, so people see it and they can feel it, so they understand, like, here's a pallet of wood. So, you know, while it's, and it could be there even though they're not necessarily buying a pallet of wood, but they can see what it takes, or boxes of nails, and how you know, use them in your centerpiece to hold candles. And now you can say there are X amount of, you know, nails here and we need that many. So could everyone donate a pen? There's so many things you can do in terms of how you tie your mission, decor, moment, fund a mission all together. So if you don't have a bed to sell necessarily at the time, or like I said, a desk or a chair, but you're selling your mission, how do you bring that mission to life? Because tangibility is important. And so that's what we've done a little bit. If you think of the Pogo example, is we're trying to make pajamas, kids cancer synonymous, so that for the regular person, it's easy. Because again, our brains don't like to work because it consumes calories, and so we need to make it simple. So it's things like that. But the fund and need definitely works. And, you know, to your point as well, about board members, no one is ever going to starve because they gave money. Fundraising is not scary, but we know people think it is. So, you know, it's also scary for people to be without a home and to watch their animals suffer and all of those types of things. So I'm a big fan of some tough love, and you know what, you're on the board, so here you go. And maybe you don't like to sit down and do the major gift stuff that you coach people on, Cindy, because I wouldn't necessarily be that person, but I can absolutely help you fill that room, and I can absolutely, you know, go ask for those silent auction items. So to your point, you know, use your board members and give them specific tasks. Super important. Yeah. Because there's nothing, we all know we have those boards where they're like, yeah, someone could do that, or you could do that. It's like, or you could do that, and then we'll be successful together.
Yeah, definitely. Everyone loves to delegate, but you need to give people very specific roles. Filling the room is a big one, and then talking to people once they're in the room. In my experience, and maybe you can touch on this, and I want to get to some of the questions, but before I do, in my experience, your volunteer committee or your board, whoever is selling tickets, makes or breaks the success of an event. If you are relying entirely on staff, and you guys can like put your cameras up to the computer and record this if you want to share it with anyone else, you cannot rely entirely on staff to fill an event. You absolutely need either volunteers or board members who can commit to filling the room. And your price point and your event type and everything else needs to reflect their ability to get people out. So if they're telling, if you want to have $1,000 dinner ticket, but they're saying, well, we can sell tickets for $10, you're not going to be successful. You need to understand who you can reach and how you can fill the room and build to that. So that was my
well, and I think it's super important too, because it's also, you have to think about who you are, who you're selling to, who's buying, and then who's in the room the night of the event as well. Because, so as an example, just because it's a good one, is at Sick Kids, we had a board, a committee just for our event of very, very high net worth individuals. Now our event price was $200 because we were looking to grow the younger gen. We didn't want a big gala. We wanted a super great cocktail parties. But we had these super high-end, super wealthy ladies who were getting amazing silent auction items, but 3/4 of the room would never be able to afford them. So I think it's, you've got to think of all those things along the way, because you might be like, oh my God, I've got every new Prada purse, but if no one can buy them, or the minimum bid starts at 500, then, it doesn't jive. So it's like, it's a good point. I'm just expanding on it, Cindy. Like, you can't build your budget against $1,000 a ticket, and your volunteer board or your staff or your donors or your whoever aren't in that category. You're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah. So there's a couple questions. Stephanie, I'm going to try shorten this a bit, but basically when you're getting auction items auction items, do you have some advice on how to actually ask? Like, what do people need to do to get those items in the door? Because that can feel overwhelming for people too, right? Like, everyone has these great auctions, but you need to hustle to get those items. So what advice can you give to Stephanie around the ins and outs of asking for those things?
So I think if you're working with your committee, again, to your point, you need other people. Like, your staff can't be the ones who are doing all the asking either. It's as a committee. Well, I always try first as a staff team. What do we want? What are those things? So then when we go and we ask, we're not brainstorming 100% with the group. And then I would absolutely give them a list. These are the items we're looking for. It's always start with your circle. If you're looking for hair stuff, how about your hair salon, your plastic surgeon, your favorite restaurant, I've seen it all, as we probably all have, your favorite artist, your sister's brother who's a chef at a restaurant, who can they do this? Someone. So it's help them get excited about that. Give them the tools, a letter and an email. A letter and an email is huge in terms of people like stuff. People need the letters and the things to sort of hide behind, or not hide, find security in. So provide them with that. Like, it's our job as staff to make our volunteers' jobs easier. It's not their jobs to make ours harder, although that's a whole other topic as well. But it is our job to make it as easy as possible for them to go do what we need them to do. So make sure they have those tools. Make sure they've got parameters around what it is you're looking for, price points. We had, I was working with a small community Y. I'm on a board there. And we had one woman. So it's more a working class group that I was working with, but we had one woman who's fairly wealthy. And I say working class in the nicest, kindest, and biggest way. It's not the Sick Kids group of ladies, but she had a ton, because they do business on their one of their credit cards, and they have air miles. So she went and bought 20,000, she had so many points from the year of business, she bought X amount of thousands of dollars worth of prizes for the silent auction. And she felt so good about giving. So I think there's creative ways to look at how you get those items and how people can help. But again, it's up to us to offer those ideas and suggestions, because once we do, they'll start to think. But chances are, because they don't do what we do, they're not going to think about it first and foremost.
Yeah.
And then when you plant those seeds, the plant grows.
Totally. So there's a couple of questions. I'm going to go in order. So first, the board and executive director are resistant to the fund and need type thing at their event. They're in Silicon Valley, which is a huge opportunity. A lot of high net worth guests who are more than willing to donate. But there's resistance. Now, is it resistance to sort of directly asking? Or is it resistance just to the fund and need? Because the fund and need is a great opportunity, but I've also seen organizations where they actually like say, there is a donation form under your plate, please pull it out and make a donation for this or whatever. So I want to make sure we're specifically talking about what your challenge is, but how do you convince the decision makers to do these that we know work?
So I'd figure out who the decision makers are. and if it's your executive director, I would start asking, like, why? I mean, at the end of the day, they might be uncomfortable. A lot of the times, I'm going to share an example, just to show that while we're in fundraising, we're not necessarily fundraisers. So I was hired by Sick Kids to create their first ever signature event. And so huge undertaking, started a walk, whole thing. It was fabulous. It was a lot of fun, a lot of work. I'm surprised I'm not fully great. So great. We've finally got this thing up and running. We've got buy-in. We're good. I get everyone registered because now I'm the spokesperson for this thing. Not only do I want it to be a success, believe in it and know it, but now I've got to make sure everyone knows what they need to do. And so I had the CEO and the senior team say, okay, so now Amy, I've registered. What do I do now? And I was like, pardon me? I'm like, set up your personal page. And then they're like, okay, done that, but now what? And I said, okay, so I need to go home, sit in my hot tub and have a drink and a conversation about this, because what do you mean? What do you do next? So I came back and realized, or what percolated was, wow, we're fundraisers. We sell fundraising, but we're not necessarily fundraisers ourselves. And it was a fundamental difference. And it meant, so my senior team or my CEO could absolutely walk into, a Rogers with all the forms and all the things that were presented, that his whole team put together, and he'd be like, 30 million, please. But when he had to ask his personal networks and put himself and that vulnerability on the line personally, it was very different. And it was something I had never experienced. And I'm glad I did, because it gave me a great insight into our leadership team, people in this sector, our own volunteers, our own selves, where I'm a fundraiser. It's a new project. I set up the garage sale. I've got the lemonade stand, but we work with both types of those people. And so I think, really long answer, but wanted to share this story, was that I think you need to find out why. Yeah. Chances are that person's uncomfortable or thinks it'll make the guests uncomfortable. Great. So be uncomfortable. We need to raise money. You need to be uncomfortable.
And actually, I would talk to your guests or talk to your volunteers, because they're often not uncomfortable. We're uncomfortable, or the executive director is uncomfortable. The most successful fundraising events I've seen are where they explicitly ask for something that the organization needs. And Amy and I have had this conversation. People are sick of coming out to events. They come out being prepared to give because they know, and we all know, why we're having the events. So make it easy for them. Don't beat around the bush. They're there. They're willing to give. If they're not willing to give, they're not going to write a check, and that's fine. But just make it easy for them. They don't want to take home another so-and-so package for whatever auction item that they're never going to use. I actually spoke to a friend of mine who gives, she's an amazing, actually a lot of some of the guests will know her, Emily D, who's a photographer. she donates consistently these very high value photography packages, portrait photography packages, to lots of local organizations. She told me 90% of the time, no one redeems them. No one is using the stuff that they get at your auction because they're doing it just to spend money, because they're prepared to spend money. So make it meaningful to them so that they can fund something that actually resonates with your mission. So I feel like that was a bit of a rant, but so to Amy's point, find out what the barriers are, see if you can so there's sort of like the it works angle. It's what guest attendees want. Often they don't want more stuff. They want to help your organization. So give them the tools to do so. And I would then find a couple champions or people who are like, well, yeah, I'd rather do that than this. Or, you know, who are the influencers who can help convince? And then taking it a step further, if someone like an influencer could even do a match where they're like, if we, you know, I'll match dollar for dollar everything up to $10,000 or $5,000 or even $1,000 if you're a small organization, that sort of sweetens the pot to take that risk for the executive director and other decision makers. I want to go through the questions now because we're running out of time and I want to make sure. So type your questions and we'll go through, but how do you handle when someone offers stuff that you don't see value in?
We say no, thank you. I think again, as nonprofits for so long, or charities, or, you know, we've so long just taken what we can get. And I think there's the thank you, but no thank you. And I think we have to get better at it. Because if it's not going to add value, if it's not going to sell, it's taking up a spot on, say, the silent auction table that something else might work. It might be a raffle item that it's not going to sell. So, I mean, you say thanks, but no thanks. And I think that's where, if you're coaching if you're more thoughtful in terms of what you want on your silent auction based on your theme and your experience, I think you'll start to see less and less. So instead of that, you know, spray and pray kind of approach,
give us everything.
It's like, no, this is what I want. And I think, you know, again, we just have to be more specific, which means we have to think a little bit more, which in the end are all the little things that make our event experience that much more meaningful.
Yeah. So Steve is asking, for a very small nonprofit of 1 staff member and 12 board members, 2 of 3 who are very engaged, what type of events are feasible?
See, that I think is going to take me a couple more minutes to think about. So I'm happy to take that offline and have a quick brainstorm about that, because I think I would need to know a little bit more, Steve, to give you a really good answer, but I'm absolutely more than happy to have a conversation about it for sure. Because there's things that are possible. I would have a few more questions, but I'd love to happily answer that.
And some questions that you might think about, just for the sake of everyone, because I know there are lots of people in similar situations, is like, who can those 12 board members, or realistically 2 or 3, who can they reach? Who can they engage? What other parts of your constituency or community can you engage? So do you have service users who would also want to be part of your event? In some cases, the answer is no. In some cases, the answer is yes. Like what role or outcomes do you want the event to have? Is it just to raise money? Is it to build community? Like, there's so many factors, but the more you know, and this is Amy's very first point, but the more you know about your organization, who you're connected with, what your mission is, the better you can make those decisions around what makes sense for you.
Because it might be as simple as one of those board members hosting a small backyard gathering that over time, you know, you don't necessarily need the big, huge thing right off the bat. You can have a very meaningful event. You can have a very meaningful event that has 25 people. You can have better conversations. So, you know, I think it's a great conversation to have. And my brain will continue to go, and I can help you through it for sure.
Yeah.
But I know there's a few other questions, but I'm happy to take it offline for sure.
So Javier is asking, how do you handle if you're not for profit but not a charity and you can't give tax deductible receipts? I'll let you answer and then, yeah.
Yeah. So that's one of my favorites. So really at the same time, I would say similar to your point on, MLED's photo packages that nobody used. And this is a soapbox, people can agree or not to agree. We've told people tax receipts matter in any level of, that they're going to add so much value or it's such a good deal. I would never lead with this as a tax deductible option. I encourage all my clients and any nonprofit I've ever worked with, do not separate the ticket out in terms of the portion. It's like when I go to the store and I buy a can of Diet Coke, I'm buying a can of Coke and a Diet Coke, and I'm not getting part of the money back because if I hand in the tab or what have you, it's like, just don't go there, because it's not truly, at the end of the day, the value is not there. A tax receipt for a major gift, yes. A tax receipt for part of a piece of artwork that it just doesn't jive. And so I think, or it's just not worth the time. I watch so many nonprofit organizations, especially the small guys, you have enough to worry about. Now you're figuring out like how to cut stuff in half and don't even go there.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason a lot of our guests ask is because we've told them to care about that subject. Yeah. And so if we just get rid of it, we're fine.
And when they do ask, because I totally agree, I think like that it's not usually a barrier for people, but they might ask. So what's like a one-liner you can say, you know what? Here's why it's not important, what they're telling you it's not important.
Yeah. Yeah. You can make a major gift and we'll give you a tax receipt. No, I would just,
right? Yeah.
I think, honesty is always the best policy, and straight up. And it's like, we're not offering tax receipts.
Yeah.
Like I literally am that simple with those types of things. Like, we're not offering it. But
yeah,
like that's just, it's kind of like when you say sorry and you don't add but, or you don't, then it's like, we don't offer tax receipts.
Awesome.
That's simple. And then, and I don't necessarily think that you need to advertise in any of your marketing materials or on your poster that we will not give tax receipts. Just remove it from the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Dave.
Oh, I don't think it's fishy, Dave. I think if you've got,
yeah.
Sorry.
Dave, where are you from? Because I have a feeling you're from the UK. Because there's there's like a lot of new crazy regulations out in the UK. But so I was wondering, you talk with an accent. It was just because an earlier comment you made about regulation or something like that. I was like, yeah, I think that, I think if you have to say we don't issue tax receipts, we're a not-for-profit, not a charity. If you feel like you need to take it that far, that I think doesn't sound fishy. And depending, I can't remember what your organization does, but most people don't understand the difference, quite frankly. But I would, but if they really push back, you can take the time to educate them. But chances are, I would say it's more of an issue in like the fund a need type thing, or doing a general ask at an event where, sorry, I'm also reading the comments, where you're asking people to give more. When people don't understand, and people don't understand the difference between a charity and a nonprofit here in Canada, and the rules elsewhere are different. The reason I asked about the UK is they're going nuts over there with new regulations. I can't keep on top of it. But for that, just say like for this event, or as a nonprofit organization, not a charity, we're not in a position to issue tax receipts. But for sponsors, like you can give them a receipt just so they know what, like they have proof of purchase or something like that. And often, especially if it's a business, that's all they need. right? The businesses don't actually need an actual tax receipt. They just need a receipt to show that they've spent money. Everyone is asking for more sort of ideas on like where, if you're starting a first event, like if you don't have an event and you need to do an event and you're super small, you maybe have a tiny board and not many people, like what do you do? But before I throw that back to you, Amy, I do want to say this, go back to the hammer and nail example or the flannel fireside thing. Like start, like Mo asked this as well. Mo, you got to do something hockey related, right? Mo is hockey for youth. You need go back to what you as an organization are. What's your core? And play off of that. Jenna was asking about the period purses. So let's take the time to just like talk about some of those associations that you were making earlier, like brainstorming. If your organization does this, what would make sense?
Absolutely. And so what I think, so just in terms of process and like, because I can give examples and I will. I think the point I'd like to make is that I could say you could do a gala, a walk, a DIY, a third-party program, what have you. But what is specific to you, for me, the way that I plan events with my clients and I've done is when I've been in the non-for-profit is I've started with that word or I've started with that thing that matters. So the pajama, and then we built from there. And so small organization, we ended up with a gala and we ended up with a DIY. And the site will be live. And I'm happy to... sorry, I was shifting around. I'm going to send some stuff out after and probably in about a week on some information that I think can help. But I can send you the link to the pajamas and pancakes and you'll see, the DIY and how that works. And so DIY right now, it's do-it-yourself fundraising. The lingo is everywhere. It's really third-party fundraising. It's actually a signature event without an event day, which I think a lot of nonprofits can benefit from. And so I'm really working with a lot of my mid to smaller clients with these ideas because that's where we can really bring the mission to life and we can really empower our constituent group to go out and do these things for us in a meaningful brand building way that can really help your organization. So definitely happy to share with that. But I think for a lot of it and what's happened in the past is people have asked, like, what can I do? I'm small. This is what I've got. All very good questions, but have just gone, okay, we're going to do this because it's happening over there. It's like, let's start. So, another example, when we started the Great Camp Adventure Walk for sick kids came out of the word fierce for me. So we're sitting in a brainstorm and we learned because we did research with our clients that meaning the kids and the doctors and the nurses and the parents, they didn't feel sad. No, sad wasn't their underlying feeling when they were at the hospital. These kids were fierce. They were fierce to get better. They wanted to, overcome everything. And so while we're sitting in a room, it's like, okay, how do we do this? What is it? And then for me, I'm thinking about ideas and what do we do? And then fierce, camp. When you go to camp, you have to be fierce. And then literally from camp, I brought camp to life on the streets. Again, we had bigger budgets, yes, but the process for me didn't start first with a choice of a walk, a run, a gala, a cocktail party, a stair climb, or what have you. I think of like for some of the hammer and heart stuff, would it be cool if you had an old house and again, brainstorming, so you're not allowed to like say that can't happen. You have an old house and there's all sorts of things you can do, or you build a fence together and there's beer in the middle. There's all sorts of things that you can do. And I think it starts the way that I like to work and the way that I think that I've seen the most success in things is when you literally start at the core of who you are and you build from there. And then that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, I so agree. And that actually addresses Lisa's question too, which is like it doesn't have to be a fundraising event. That principle of like, who are we? What are our values and how does that come alive in a fundraising event, awareness event, marketing event, whatever, like peer-to-peer campaign, direct mail appeal, like everything that you're doing, if it goes back to that core, like I feel I'm going to channel my sister who's a social worker. And like, I feel like they always talk about your assets. Like, what are the things that are powerful for you, that are, you know, your strength, and start there. And you cannot go wrong if you're starting with those assets as well as your mission. Like, every decision, if you go back to that, you're going to lead on the right path. And yeah, Amy has this like amazing creative mind. And I know some of us might be envious of that because we're not all creative, but you can even get people together in a room and brainstorm, and you might not get your final product, but you'll just start to, you'll sort of go deep on those very specific things that might open up opportunities. So, and yeah, like, it will, the more you know about people, the more you have a team of people around you who will help make it successful, the more you just build towards that, right? What are the people, what do our volunteers need to be successful, and what can we reasonably do? That's going to eliminate a whole bunch of things and maybe put certain things on the table. Does it fit with our mission? Okay, going to eliminate some more, maybe add a couple more things. Like, it's an iterative process. But what I love about your approach, Amy, is that it's so grounded in the organization. And that, to me, is the key to success, whatever you do. So, yeah. Am I cut off, or did I think Amy is frozen, or I'm frozen. Does anyone have any questions before we hop off the line? Can you hear me? Okay. Amy, you're frozen. I don't know if you can see that. It's a pleasure. I know this is, oh, there you are. Hold on. Amy, you there?
Yep.
Okay, you cut off for a minute.
Sorry. I disappeared. I got erased.
So we're hearing lots of thank yous and stuff. If there's any other questions, I have a few more minutes. And I know Amy's offered to brainstorm with people for a little bit. So do you want to just type in your into the chat?
Yeah.
Because I totally understand that it can be so overwhelming, like the creative process. It takes practice, and doesn't always come naturally to everyone. But yeah, okay. Rochelle asked, outdoor community event for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, SurvivorCon, promote awareness.
Oh, I like that. Oh, I'd love to, yeah. Rochelle, I'd love to talk to you about that.
One of the things that I did working at the Canadian Women's Foundation was we had this, it was called Shelter from the Storm event, and we changed it. So I sort of started the process that led it to become Move for Hope. But one of the things we wanted to do, and it was at the time when so like boot camp fitness became a thing. And so we were like, okay, that is the kind of event, like peer-to-peer event that we want to do, because strong and not like aggressive in a bad way, but empowering and physically challenging, but like, you know, how do you play off the power in survival? And I think you're definitely onto something there. So Stephanie is asking, do you think that my organization, Art Education Association, needs to have a fundraiser in addition to the fundraising we do at a banquet during our art teaching conference? So I feel like we're asking the people we help to donate. So first of all, there's nothing wrong with that. I think the best organizations are the ones where the people who benefit are also contributing. To me, that's like the perfect circle of accountability. But Dave, thanks for your online accent. So I don't have a problem with that personally. And do you need anything more? I mean, that's a strategic question of like, how much more money do you need and for what, and what's the best way to get there, balancing all these other things that you might be doing. So going back, the best answer in fundraising is always, it depends. So does it make sense for you guys to do another event? Who do you know who would come out? Why would they come out? How do you get them out, etc.? It's a similar same process. You want anything to add there, Amy?
No, yeah, no, I just think it's, again, like, how do you build on to that? So she's saying it's a silent auction and we use it for a scholarship to help get other teachers gain professional development. I think it would just be looking at how do you possibly, I wouldn't say necessarily do you need something else, and this is with me not knowing a lot, Stephanie, but I would say, what are some of the things we could do to expand on what happens at that banquet, or to Cindy's point, like who's invited? So sort of take both of what Cindy just said and what I've said, and how do we make it more versus adding, how do we make it more versus adding another? And I think that that's a trap that we get into in this sector, is we keep adding more and more products to market without the right support, without the right love and strategic direction. So, look at our for-profit folks for that. You've got Coca-Cola and they've got Coke, Diet Coke, they've got one water, they've got one diet product. Like, look to there and don't overwhelm yourself. And because when you do, the message gets lost.
Yeah. Amazing. I know people are jumping off. It's probably the end of your lunchtime, and you have to go back to work, but hopefully this is helpful, and we really enjoyed having all of you here. Just a reminder that I do these monthly with different guests. You can message me if there's topics you think are that you want to hear more about, or just join us. There's some really exciting ones coming up. So cool. All right.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Cindy.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Amy.
Bye, guys.